Well, I'll start going into my intro spiel, and then as people join, hopefully they can catch up pretty easily. Hello, my name is Katie Meyer. I am the government editor and reporter for Spotlight PA, and we are here with a wonderful live event for you. Thank you for coming. I'm very excited to dig into this year's election results. So for those of you who are new to us, haven't come to events before, Spotlight PA is an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit newsroom. We produce investigative work and public service work, journalism about the state government, and urgent statewide issues. Our team is here to help you navigate the Pennsylvania election process with everything you need to know. That includes important voting deadlines, candidate guides, primers on obscure government processes, interactive voting tools. We have all of that, and we cannot do any of this work without your support. So I'd really like to pause here to ask that if you have the means to consider a tax-deductible donation to our organization, we would love for you to do it. It really makes a huge difference for us. You can do it by going to spotlightpa.org/donate. That's spotlightpa.org/donate. And right now, as part of our end of the year campaign, all donations will be doubled, and that's thanks to matching grants. So your support not only allows this event, future events, all of our journalism to continue, you also help us keep all that vital information free and available to the public. Everything on spotlightpa.org is free. It will continue to be free, but once again, please make a gift at spotlightpa.org/donate to make that possible. A couple little housekeeping things. Today's event is going to be recorded and posted on our website within the next few days for anybody who couldn't be here tonight, so feel free to share it. Thank you to everyone who submitted a question in advance. And if you would like to submit a question, you can still do so in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, and we're going to get to them towards the end of our program. So now on to the main event. Last week, Pennsylvania held a municipal election, and that includes basically an odd year election for lots of different offices. Voters chose a new judge for the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, as well as judges on the Superior and Commonwealth courts. There were also a lot of down ballot races for local offices like school boards. But for the purposes of this panel, we're mostly interested in the Supreme Court. We'll talk a little bit about the Commonwealth Court. The Supreme Court is the highest court of the state. It hands down rulings on political issues that can have a huge impact on Pennsylvanians. That's things like abortion access, election administration, redistricting. Decisions come up to the Supreme Court through the Commonwealth Court and lower courts in the state. So we'll talk about all of that. We'll also talk about some of just the overall election patterns we saw this year and what that might tell us about next year's presidential election, which is coming up quickly. So here with me to talk about all of this and to take your questions are Kadita Kenner and Deborah Gross. I'll just have the two of you introduce yourselves and your work. Kadita, let's start with you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kadita Kenner. I'm the founding CEO of the New Pennsylvania Project. We're a voting rights organization concentrating on communities of color, the youth and immigrant communities in our work. And in the last 18 months, we have registered 30,000 Pennsylvanians to vote. So excited about this conversation today.
Yeah. Thank you. And Deb, let's go to you.
Great. Thank you for having me. I'm Deborah Gross. I'm the CEO of Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts, a nonpartisan nonprofit who are focused on appellate courts, really, but the courts in general. We do a lot of education around the court system with communities, with schools. We now go into schools and have a 12-part series, and we held 2 judicial candidate forums. So thank you for having me.
Of course, thanks for coming, both of you. I'll just, to give you, to get us started, I'll do a quick overview of this year's results. Basically, across the board, Democrats did well this year. That's different than they've done in previous municipal elections. The last municipal election in 2021, not much better for Republicans, but Democrats swept the open seats on the 3 appellate courts. They also had really strong showings in the down ballot races. So Deborah, I'll start with you just for context. Can you run us through the balance of power on the 3 appellate courts once the new judges are sworn in?
Sure. So the balance of power in the Supreme Court hasn't changed. In other words, it is, 5, it will be, I guess, 5 Democrats, 2 Republicans. The Superior Court is 8 Democrats and 6 Republicans. And the Commonwealth Court is 4 Democrats and 5 Republicans. But I'm just going to give this line. The judges don't necessarily like to be known as a Democratic judge or Republican judge. What I also think is most interesting is that there are so many women now on the appellate courts. And
Yeah, well, and we were talking about that a little bit before the panel started, and I hadn't realized how much of a high watermark it is, but it is, right? This is,
oh, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, the Supreme Court didn't change, but the Superior Court is almost, I'm going to say almost all women, which is remarkable. We were talking to Judge Beck, who was the first woman on the Superior Court, and that was in 1981.
Yeah. Well, and that gives us a little bit of a sense of the scale here. So 81, again, that was the first woman on, you said, on any appellate court?
Yep.
That's crazy.
On the Superior Court, actually. But I think.
Okay. That's good to know. So I do want to get much more into, as you mentioned, like the perception of these judges as sort of political, but not totally political. And, I think it's a difficult position for them because they are elected, they run as part of a party. But before we get into that, I want to go to Khadija real quick. So for the people who are still unfamiliar, can you tell us a little bit about Dan McCaffrey? He is the Superior Court judge who has won a seat on the Supreme Court. He'll be taking that seat in January. He's a Democrat. What can you tell us about him?
Yeah, Dan McCaffrey, a longtime judge, a longtime member of the Democratic Party. As you mentioned, has served on the Common Pleas Court, now the Superior Court, and now Justice-elect. And I believe that he truly ran on what he values, and he was very, very upfront about what it is he values and what he would work to protect as a justice. I mean, we are living in very hyper-partisan times. And as Deb mentioned, judges don't want to be known to have the D or the R after their name, that the decisions that they make should be based upon the Constitution and not a political party they belong to. But we can't be naive to not think that judges are also people too. And they also come with various things that they value deeply in their personal lives and what they would bring to the court.
Yeah, and I'll ask you the same question about his Republican opponent who lost the race, Carolyn Carluccio. Just briefly, what's a quick overview of her?
Yeah, my recollection is that she has mentioned that she's a strict constitutionalist, constructionist, excuse me, and that that's the way in which she would most likely have ruled if given the opportunity. A lot of the commentary coming out of her primary election, commentary about being a defender of all life, and then having that been removed from her website during the general election. So I think we also got an idea of what she values as an individual and possibly what she would do if given the opportunity.
Yeah, and we just got a comment in from Donna, who I think gets at something that I wanted to ask about, which is the political messaging in this race. I'll just say briefly, so Donna said she saw no flyers from Dan McCaffrey, which is actually surprising to me because both of the candidates spent a lot of money on advertising. In McCaffrey's case, it was spent on his behalf by outside PACs. Carluccio got a lot of money from a PAC that mostly gets his money from this guy, Jeff Yass. He's the wealthiest person in Pennsylvania. So not in Huntington County. That's interesting. But anyway, I would like to ask a little bit more about the tenor of this race. First, I'll just say, as a little bit of an overview, there were a couple different lines of attack. One of the ones on McCaffrey was that he's been involved in Democratic politics for a really long time, kind of was cast as an insider, and also the fact that his older brother, Seamus McCaffrey, was a Supreme Court justice and stepped down in the middle of the Porngate scandal, which you can tell, doesn't sound like the best scandal, but it was judges sending explicit emails from their government accounts. And so he stepped down in the midst of that. That was kind of pinned on McCaffrey during the messaging part of this. And in terms of Carluccio, she was really seen, or cast at least, as more of an ideologue, especially on the issue of abortion. I think abortion was just an inescapable issue. And Khadija, I want to go to you again before we get to Deb. Tell us a little bit about what the effect you think abortion had and why, just a quick background on why that was such a big thing this year.
Those of us who are working in organizations trying to turn out the vote have said throughout this entire election season that local and municipal judicial elections matter, and they matter maybe even more than any federal election could, that the issues that they care about at the heart of their families, the heart of of where they stand, their values, will be determined in an election such as this, in an odd year, which some will call an off year, but it should not. And I think what we learned as an organization is that folks really took that message to heart, and they came out in record numbers, right? So more than 35% turnout in an odd year election here the year before a presidential election. And they made their voices heard that they want to protect their rights and their freedoms. And abortion, yes, was absolutely on the ballot. So were our voting rights on the ballot in this moment. And so I believe that Pennsylvanians came out in these record numbers because they wanted to protect their rights and freedoms. And I think that the messaging that it's in a judicial election where you can actually do that is something that rang true for many.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. And I also, just to kind of give as background, like why this is a really a genuinely live issue in this race. So Roe versus Wade, when it was overturned in the Dobbs decision, basically it put the question of whether abortion should be accessible or how accessible it should be back to states. So it's now up to state legislatures and also state judges to make that decision. And so our state legislature is politically divided right now, very narrowly. Democrats hold the House by like 1 seat. And the Supreme Court is generally seen in Pennsylvania right now, because it has a Democratic majority, as a court that would not rule to make abortion less accessible. That's the general assumption about how this court would rule. So that's kind of the background here about court control. But Deb, I just want to ask, is there anything you want to add on that about, you know, the importance of these really key issues in this race?
Well, so first, I don't think the numbers are 35%. I think it's more closer to 30% turnout, unfortunately, or at least for the judicial races, maybe for some of the others, which is a concern, because it's the minority making a decision for the majority. And the numbers dropped off. So people might have voted for the Supreme Court, not realizing that the other appellate courts are, in my mind, are just as important, because they issue decisions that have a final effect or final importance on Pennsylvanians. So, for example, the Commonwealth Court issued a decision that saying that the way we fund education in Pennsylvania is unconstitutional. It is a majorly important, I can't emphasize it enough, decision. And yet people don't pay attention to the candidates for Commonwealth Court. The case was never appealed, so wasn't appealed to the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court isn't going to address it unless maybe something happens in the future. But right now, that's a really important decision that we need to understand where it came from, and and people just didn't understand that, and the numbers dropped off in the Commonwealth Court. The other thing that was really shocking in this election, and I know you'll get to it, is how much money in total was spent for one Supreme Court seat. I mean, it's something in upwards of $22 million for one Supreme Court seat that wasn't going to change the balance. So what does that mean for the future when there are seats that could potentially change the balance?
Yeah. Well, and we will get into that a little bit later, but I do want to just briefly say, while we're on the topic of campaign finance, Spotlight had a story out, I think it came out today or yesterday, I can't remember. Was it today?
It's yesterday.
It was yesterday. But in any case, we looked at just the overall universe of spending, and we don't have all of the spending in yet. There's still some that has to be reported, but it's probably going to end up being more than $22 million. And so we have a graphic in there that shows you like per seat expenses over the last, since 2015, I think we went back to, which was a big spending year, and this blows it out of the water. And so what we saw, I actually, Kadita, I would like to ask you this question while we're on the topic, because we were mentioning before we came onto this panel. I mean, your organization spent in this race, you received some of the giant universe of money, not that much or anything, but some of it. And I'm just curious, what do you see as having driven spending? Was it just these hot button issues that were really top of mind?
Yeah, so I'll say, first of all, our organization is grateful for everyone who donates money to us so we can expand the electorate. And there's been thousands who have done that across the Commonwealth and across the country. So I'll say that first. But I would like to say that as it relates to across the board, the spending, I think that there was so much money spent in this race because of 2025. And what could happen potentially in 2025. And I think investments were made by people who have a lot of money to find out, what is going to happen here in 2023, that if Republicans were able to win this election, how much more money would be spent in 2025 to try to disrupt the retention votes of 3 democratically elected Supreme Court justices. So I think this is a testing ground. Like, if we spend this money, can we get the results that we're looking for? And can we get closer to a result that we're really looking for 2025, which is to overturn three Democratic justices from sitting on the bench for another 10 years?
Yeah, and we teased 2025, but let's just dive into it now to kind of fully explain this issue. So Supreme Court, or all appellate court judges in Pennsylvania, all of these judges we've been talking about, they're elected to 10-year terms. They're elected in a statewide partisan election, so they run as part of a party. But then what they do is a nonpartisan retention election. And just what that means, you saw some on your ballot this year if you voted. It's a yes or no vote to either keep a judge on the court for another 10 years, or say, sorry, you're off. We don't like you for some reason. And judges almost never lose retention elections. But what's important about 2025 is that it was a huge year of turnover. A bunch of judges had resigned or stepped off the bench. And so in 2015, 3 Democratic judges were elected, and now they are up for retention. So Deb, what are you expecting 2025 to look like?
I mean, there is already talk that the troops are gathering, are circling, to start focusing on 2025. So it's concerning, because are we going to now have an inordinate raise of money for retention elections, which usually go under the wire, and also most people don't even understand how you make that decision. So I was looking at past numbers from retention elections, and they have been relatively consistent. The judges are retained by like 60-70%. There are some that are, saying we shouldn't retain, but judges, for the most part, I think 95% of the time, 99% of the time have been retained.
Yeah. Well, and I do think, just in my own sort of like limited universe of data on this, we did guides on retention elections this year, and people really read them. And I think it kind of goes to show people want to understand what's going on here, but it can be a confusing process. Kadita, as somebody who's more in the world of like trying to get people to vote, trying to engage voters, is this something you're already thinking about?
It is, and grateful for those who took the time to really get the ballot ahead of time, go through it to make sure they were able to make the correct decisions for them and their families. So this is absolutely something we're looking forward to in 2024 and beyond, is to provide as much civic education as we possibly can to folks to get them to vote, and then also vote all the way down the ballot. As Deb mentioned, the drop off. I think it was something like 33,000 votes difference between those who voted in the Supreme Court race versus those who voted in the Commonwealth Court race. And so some folks decided to cast a ballot for the Supreme Court, but maybe they didn't have enough information to make a decision to vote down the ballot. And so that's something that really excites an organization like mine, is making sure we're providing civic education so people feel confident that when they get into the polling location, that they are making the correct decision for them and their families.
Yeah, yeah. I want to getting back onto our sort of our line of questions that we had cooked up here. I want to ask you both about partisanship on the courts. So, by way of background, we'd mentioned that judges, they're elected as part of a political party. I should say judges have different rules when they run for office or run for the bench. It's not office. Than politicians do. So they are not allowed to solicit donations directly. Their campaign has to do that, which is kind of considered a separate entity. They're not allowed to say, for instance, I would rule this way on this issue, but they can nod at that stuff. And they are part of a political party. Their campaign does have to raise money. And as we've been talking about, they raised a ton of money, and it's money from political actors. So I want to ask you a question just that I think a lot of people might have about this. So, like, how does partisanship affect the way that a judge behaves on the bench? How can, your membership in a party inform the way that you think a judge might act on the bench? And on that one, Kadita, I'll start with you on that.
Yeah, this is a little difficult, right? Because I think, which could sway some folks more in the decisions that they could possibly make would be who they received all of the money from, and that what do they owe to the folks that they received all that money from, more than the political parties. I don't believe it's the Democratic Party that gave a lot of money compared to others, or the Republican Party who actually gave the money. It was other sources that gave a lot of the money. So, I think that, we run elections in a partisan way so that you can fund your campaign. That's the purpose of a political party, is to fund a campaign to get your candidate elected. I still under the belief that there is no Democratic or Republican way to rule and make decisions based upon the Pennsylvania state constitution, if we're going by that. So, there's you're beholden to somebody. And I think my real concern is, who are they beholden to? Is it not a political party, but is it those who gave the money and what the expectations are from that money?
Are you alluding to anybody in particular who gave money?
Well, I'm thinking about the richest folks in Pennsylvania and the money they gave and their stance on wanting to overturn abortion in Pennsylvania. And so if you're giving millions of dollars to someone who could potentially one day ever see a case before them that could overturn abortion in Pennsylvania, then you might owe them something. And so this is part of us wanting to have a very free and fair and independent judiciary. And it gets very clouded when all the money enters the picture.
Yeah. And Deb, I'll go to you on this because I know you have a lot of thoughts on money and also partisanship when it comes to the courts. I'll ask you generally to weigh in. What do you think?
So, first I'll tell you, PMC believes in merit selection. Would take money out of the picture. Really important. But we need to have a merit selection that would also take politics out of the picture, which is, how do you do that is the question, but there are ways. And but Pennsylvanians have to be willing to hear them. But, there was an interesting factor here in this election, which I have not seen before. And that was that there were groups that put out ads for the candidates that the candidates weren't even aware of. I mean, they were completely third party groups. So it is interesting in that I don't even know how to say this right, but the ACLU and Planned Parenthood, right, put out ads. They weren't solicited by the campaigns. It was completely independent. And when we had the appellate court candidate forum, both Judge Carluccio and Judge McCaffrey were talking about how the advertising got out of their control, like out of their hands. Like they wish that they could dial things down because it really did get to another level this year.
Yeah. And that's, I think, an important thing to say, that both judges, while they were running before the election even happened, said, like, there's been too much money in this race. It's out of control. And the ads did get pretty aggressive, I would say. And that was against both judges. And
I'll just say, with the code of judicial conduct that you refer to has rules for judges and their campaign committees, right? But we in Pennsylvania have these very lax, beyond lax, rules about campaign funding, and so that or advertising, and so they really didn't have control or couldn't have control over these third parties.
Yeah. And this might be getting a little granular, but I've spent a week thinking about it, and so I think it's interesting. The thing that you're referring to is independent expenditures, which has always been a thing in Pennsylvania politics, but there was a huge rise in that practice this year. And what that means is, again, outside groups spending on a candidate's behalf or against another candidate without consultation with any candidate. And that is especially interesting because there's a different set of rules about who your donors can be if you're spending independently. And crucially, it means you can take money from dark money groups, which people like to call everything a dark money group, but there's a very specific definition, which is just that you're organized in a way, usually you're a 501c4, and that means you don't have to report who gave you money. So these PACs that are like a black box are then giving money to a PAC that is then using independent expenditures on a candidate's behalf. I'll say too, so where Carluccio mostly got a lot of her money from a PAC funded probably by one rich guy named Jeff Yass, he was giving money directly to her campaign, and then her campaign was spending it. but the McCaffrey spending was mostly being spent on his behalf by these outside groups. So it was a very interesting dynamic. And I think, Deb, as you kind of alluded to it, it opens up Pennsylvania's politics to this wide world of money. And there's not much in the law to tamp that down in a judicial race or any other race. Okay, I could talk about campaign finance a lot, but I'm going to restrain myself. Khadija, I'll ask you this. Is it too soon to ask like what this election might tell us about the dynamics we could see in Pennsylvania next year in the presidential election?
No, I don't think it's too soon. I mean, we were talking about the 2024 election in 2020.
25, I know, yeah.
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 So I don't think it's too soon. I think that what most Pennsylvanians want is we want safe and secure elections. And so with the outcome of the 2023 election, I think we have a better shot at making sure that those who want to cast a ballot by mail will have access to do that. And that those who would like to have access to abortion will have access to abortion in Pennsylvania, as long as the Supreme Court is going to punt these things down to the states. So I don't think it's too soon. I think the lesson is for those running for office in 2024 is that if you come for our rights and our freedoms, the voters are going to come out, and they're going to come out in record numbers, and they're going to vote, and they're going to decide what they want for themselves and their families. So no, I don't think it's too soon to talk about 2024.
All right.
And I just want to add that Khadija used the right words, safe and secure elections, right? It was a good election. I mean, there wasn't any craziness or, everything worked okay. We didn't have lawsuits as a result of this election. So it shows that, we don't need to resort to the courts, but we do have them if we have to resort to them.
Yeah. Well, and I'll kind of drill down on exactly like what the expectation is too, because, I think we mentioned before, Democrats did very well in this election. That has not been the case. For instance, in 2021, Democrats did not do well. 2020, even though Joe Biden won Pennsylvania, down ballot, Republicans did much better. We saw that start to reverse in 2022. I think it's impossible to kind of separate that out from the issue of abortion becoming so much more important in states. But Khadija, I'm just wondering, do you extrapolate that out as somebody who's looking at what results might be next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes beyond. So abortion was a hot ticket issue for her this year, obviously, because, with the overturning of Dobbs, then we know how important state courts are going to be and how powerful they can be. As a voting rights organization, I'm always going to concentrate on the voting rights aspect of this. Pennsylvania ranked the second most litigious state in the country in 2022 as it pertained to democracy issue lawsuits. And so I'm going to be always concerned about the voting rights of Pennsylvania and access to the ballot. So that's where we stand on that.
Yeah, yeah. And I also asked, because you are so involved in get out the vote efforts, are there any parts of the state where you saw like particular turnout or interesting patterns of voting that are worth noting?
Yeah, we saw the color counties of Philadelphia coming out with record turnout, and areas that had lots of youth voters, college campuses, where college students were registered to vote on their college campus and not back home where they are when they're not on college campus the majority of the year. So I think that we were seeing folks who came out to vote who previously had maybe never voted in a judicial election before. And because there was year-round engagement and conversation with what they will call low propensity voters, but we call opportunity voters, those that a campaign would never reach out to or talk to, they were engaged this year, and they were provided with the civic education necessary to come out and feel good about casting a ballot. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have such low turnout in these local municipal judicial election years, because people just don't know who these candidates are, what the offices do, what they're responsible for, and they just choose to stay home rather than make a bad decision, which they may think is a bad decision if they're uninformed.
Deb, you had mentioned before the kind of reality of voter, I guess, attrition in the down ballot races where turnout was higher for the Supreme Court, less so down the ballot.
Right.
On that or anything else in terms of turnout and results?
Well, so it's interesting that there were two counties, Bucks County and Dauphin County, where there was a change in like the school board or some other, grouping, right? And so I also believe it's not only the abortion issue, but it's the ban the book issue. It's the right to your own body issue, the right to your own making your own decision issue. So, there were pockets where there were high turnouts, because of what was going on within that county or community.
Yeah, that I'm glad you brought that up because we did see a lot of school board races, obviously, this year, as in any municipal election year, but also a lot of school board races where an unusual amount of money went in. Bucks County has had a lot of money in its school board races, or school board races that were very, very political and divided over these topics like book bans or what bathroom can kids use, that kind of thing. And I think that's a good thing to bring up because I just read anecdotally like Lancaster had really high turnout in some places. These different parts of the state had very intense races. So yeah, thanks for flagging that. I do want to start getting into some questions. And so if folks on anything we've talked about or anything else, if you want to start submitting questions, we would love to answer them for you. The first one that I'd like to flag is from Suzanne. She asks, how is someone selected to run for office? How can we check their backgrounds? She says she's deeply concerned that one of her state representatives is unqualified. So this is specifically on party selection. And so I don't know if either one of you wants to take that. We can start with either of you.
I'll start. Yeah. So the question is, how do we learn more about the candidates so that we're making the right decisions?
How do parties settle on a candidate?
Yeah. Well, we're gonna find out, right? We have there's going to be a special election very soon in Bucks County with the election of State Representative Galloway now going to the municipal court, right? So we're going to see that, and then the Democratic Party there is going to assist in finding someone to replace him. The Republican Party is going to try to absolutely run a candidate there and take that seat away from Democrats because it is a one vote majority in the House, right? So this can determine the Speaker's gavel again for like the fifth, sixth time in a year. So, I think that when you're talking about how do you vet someone who wants to represent you, I think we have to do our due diligence and take our time, make it a family exercise. Google is our friend. Asking questions, attending town halls when they happen, because that's happening often. Depth Group's great hosting town halls, community conversations, and getting people informed about who these candidates are. So I think that that's just on us as the electorate. It's hard enough to vote, but yes, we also need to make the right decisions and investigate the people that we want to cast a ballot for. And I think we just need to do a better job of really getting involved in democracy and attending all the events that happen, asking the questions, the hard questions. And I think that was part of the Supreme Court race, is that these judges got asked questions that typically they wouldn't get asked during an election season for a judicial election. So I think that that's part of it. I don't get into party politics like that. That's just not my lane. So I don't know how the Democratic Party or Republican Party are going to select a candidate to run in these various races. They all make their own decisions based upon that. But hopefully we are electing people that we feel represent us and our values. And, I always ask the good questions whenever I'm able. What do you do on the weekends? When you're not working, who are you donating your time to? Where are you spending your money? What organization are you supporting, when it's Sunday after watching football or before watching football? What are you doing? So I think it's really just about learning who these folks are and attending the events when they're available. And I think that's been different too, is that I think people got to really see these candidates who are running for Supreme Court this year. They were in their neighborhoods having events. And that's something that Pennsylvanians haven't truly seen in a long time, is seeing these candidates up close and having a conversation with them to determine whether or not they were somebody they were willing to cast a ballot for.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you. And go ahead, Deb.
It's just running for judge is different than running for the legislature, right? So, there are certain things that a candidate needs to be qualified, should be practicing law for probably at least 10 years, and even having never been disciplined, like certain things we know. But the bar associations also have really ramped up the job that they do investigating the candidates. The concerns you have are that there are candidates who have been elected who are not recommended by bar associations, but that's education, and we just have to keep educating people.
Yeah, no, thank you. I do want to go back really quickly to something Kadita said, and you ran through the whole thing, but just to reiterate, we do have a special election coming up for John Galloway's seat in Bucks County. And we've seen a couple of those this session already in the House, but this one I would say is the one that we've been looking at the closest, because it's a flippier seat. Like, the last one we saw was in Pittsburgh, and that was definitely going to go to the Democrats. So it's an election to watch. And also, anytime, as Kadita said, there is an open seat in the House, it means that the chamber is tied now, which just kind of basically means they can't do anything. Like, that's effectively what happens. And so another thing to look forward to, as if there wasn't enough happening. I want to read a question from Donna, who says, what are your thoughts or concerns about the emergence of new political parties like No Label and the Forward Party? How much impact do you think they'll have on presidential elections and U.S. Senate and local results? Whoever wants to take that. Kadita, that sounds like a you question, maybe.
Okay.
Sorry.
We know 2024 is going to be a tight election. We know that. And you can call them a third party. Some might call them a spoiler. Who knows what's truly going to happen in 2024. There are so many that I would say are really interested in us getting away from this duopoly of a two-party system, and would love for us to not be ruled by two parties and be able to have greater choices. I think about all of the college students that were registering to vote right now who choose to be unaffiliated. And most of the folks in that situation are choosing to be unaffiliated in this moment, and they would love to have something different than the two-party system that we currently have. But I think that we have to understand what we're working with in these current times. And in 2024, it's going to be either a Democrat or Republican who's going to win this election. And I think we just have to recognize that and know that, yeah, there are other parties that are popping up that, want their voices to be heard. And I think the primary election, exactly when things like that is supposed to happen, so that good conversation happens and we get the candidates of our choosing to go into the general election.
Yeah.
I mean, there is more talk about open primaries, and that could be really helpful, right, for even those independents, because independents are ignored or excluded, I should say, not even ignored, they're excluded at the primaries.
Yeah, that's a good point. We have seen more traction on bills to create open primaries in Pennsylvania of late. I feel like it always faces a pretty big uphill climb, because changing anything difficult is hard when you're such a divided state. But I'm always really interested to watch that. We've got one. This is an anonymous question, and I want to make sure we answer what the person is asking. They asked which county has the biggest amount of potential voters. Philadelphia is their biggest county, but I wonder if they mean like a lot of people who are not registered and could be registered. So I'll ask that part of the question. Are there places where we know that there's a lot of voters who are not participating and that number is especially high?
Absolutely. So that's what we do. New Pennsylvania Project. We're out here trying to get folks registered to vote. There are more than 1.7 million Pennsylvanians who are either not registered to vote at all or haven't cast a ballot in more than 4 years. And so there's opportunity to get people registered to vote, and then also talk to those who are registered to vote, who are still on the voting rolls, and get them to turn out. And so we're talking about sheer numbers. Obviously, it's going to be Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, where you have the greatest numbers just due to population. Larger counties like Montgomery County as well. I can't tell you how many folks were registering to vote in Norristown every day, in Montgomery County. So opportunities with the youth. Only 1 in 4 high school students who are of age to vote are actually registered to vote. these college campuses that we're on a daily basis. So many students not registered to vote, and they're 18 and they're 19, and I don't know what they're waiting on to get registered, or if it's approval from their parents sometimes. And we have to remind them that you're 18 now, you're an adult, you can get registered to vote, you can vote if you want to. So I think that, yeah, there is a huge opportunity, particularly in the areas in which there's the greatest population. And for us as an organization who centers communities of color, who centers immigrant communities, who centers the youth, it's in those communities that you have the largest voter registration gap. 1 in 5 Black folks eligible to vote in Pennsylvania not registered, and that number jumps up greatly for the Latino population and AAPI community as well. So there's work to be done, in terms of getting people excited enough to want to get registered to vote and then actually go and do the thing.
That was a really great question and a great answer. Thank you. And you really answered all the facets that I was interested in as well. We got a new question in that I immediately would like to hear what you guys want to think about it, from John. With states like Maine and Alaska now using ranked choice voting, and local municipalities in Maryland and New York using it too, do you think ranked choice voting has any chance of appearing in Pennsylvania? Would it serve the democratic process in the state? Yeah, go ahead, Deb.
I can't even imagine it making any headway in Pennsylvania. We are so backwards. So I'm sorry. I don't mean to be flippant.
Yeah, go ahead.
But like we're talking about how we can change the order that people are on the ballot, right? For judges, like it's always 1 through 10, and number 1 always wins, right? Can't we just rotate it? And you can do that. It's really not hard to do, but we can't do it in Pennsylvania. So ranked choice, I can't even picture that happening.
And we should say what ranked choice voting is, because for anybody who doesn't know, so basically the way it would work is that instead of choosing one candidate as your sole choice in what we call the winner take all system we have now, you would choose all of the candidates and you would just rank them according to how much you like them. And so that often, like the effect that people will talk about with that kind of voting is that you end up usually with more moderate winners, because those are the people who people tend to rank a little higher, if not at the highest. I would say that's one of the biggest effects. Would either of you add anything else about what it would do? I think that's yeah. So, I mean, in terms of, the likelihood, Kadita, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, with Deb, the likelihood is not so great in this moment. There's other great ways in which we could expand the democratic process, right? We could get some same-day voter registration. We could get true automatic voter registration. We can get some early voting here in the Commonwealth. We can make sure
counting the votes early.
Yeah, we could stop.
Yeah.
We could stop throwing out vote by mail ballots because they're missing a date or the wrong date. Like there's lots of ways that we could expand the democratic process here in Pennsylvania. But I'm going to give it to Pennsylvania for this. We are quite progressive as it relates to the formerly incarcerated here in Pennsylvania. They're able to vote the moment their feet hit the street, right? And cast ballots. Sometimes they're misinformed and lied to about that, but absolutely the formerly incarcerated for felonies and others are able to vote. And those currently waiting on rulings, sitting in jail, are available to vote. Those in misdemeanors in jail right now, eligible to vote. So we're progressive in that case there with Pennsylvania.
Yeah, well, thanks for flagging that. Yeah, some more comments coming in there. Let's see now. We've got another question from James that I think is a good one. With the electorate of Pennsylvania changing in terms of racial and ethnic identity, will Pennsylvania start seeing less of a rural-urban divide? If not, how can that be achieved? I think I'm curious to see what you two think about that. Whoever wants to go first.
Will there be less of a rural-urban divide? So we're a statewide organization, and we are registering folks to vote all over the place in rural, urban, suburban, exurban Pennsylvania. And the issues are the same. It's going to be the pocketbook issues anywhere that we are doing voter registration activities. So I think that the divide is lessening. And I think, there's that old saying that we don't like, many of us organizations don't like, about Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and Pennsylvania in the middle, or Pennsylvania, or whatever they call it. That has to go away, because communities of color are the growing demographic in Pennsylvania. 1 in 4 folks consider themselves to be a person of color in Pennsylvania, and they live everywhere, not just Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. So I think that that rural urban divide will lessen as time grows because the population is moving. Folks are moving out of the cities and moving into more exurban areas. So that's what we're seeing as an organization.
Yeah, just to
So
pitch
it's
one of
funny
our,
you
go
say
ahead,
that.
Jen. Yeah.
I was looking the other day at the definition of rural, right? And so, because there's some, we were looking at counties that we have some programming in and whether they were considered rural or not. So the urban or the non-rural counties are expanding, right? It's not just Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, but it's the collar counties are now considered urban.
Yeah. This actually, I'll promote one of our newsletters. I wrote this quick Q&A up today that came out in our investigator newsletter. And basically, I talked to Lara Putnam, who's a great geographer and historian in Pennsylvania. And she was telling me a lot about, the work that she does breaks Pennsylvania and breaks states down into much more than like suburban, urban, rural. It's all these different categories of suburbs where voters can behave radically differently. It's not all the same. So for instance, the Philadelphia collar counties, that's what we call like an urban suburb. And so they're much denser, they're much more ethnically diverse, and they have very different economies than somewhere, for instance, like south of Pittsburgh, where you see more of a post-industrial, I think that's called like a middle suburb instead. And then you have exurbs. And one of the things that I think is so interesting about this is that you will see shift over time. So Lancaster County is one example, and this house happens in the Lehigh Valley too, where they've gone from being a more rural, what they call middle suburb, to an exurb, which is a little more cosmopolitan, has more people moving in. There's a little bit more diversity, that kind of thing. So Pennsylvania's shifting all the time. A bunch of these were just reclassified, the Lehigh Valley and Lancaster, after the 2020 census. So I think that's really interesting. And it's also, again, the enormous diversity of the places where we kind of think that everything's a little bit the same, but a suburb, there's not just one way for a suburb to be a suburb. John has a question for us. He says, are local municipalities allowed to reshape their election systems in this state? And if so, are any places doing interesting things? I must say, I don't know. Are they allowed to do that? Great question, John.
Not without it's all controlled by the state, right? So they can't do anything rogue. How's that?
I will say this though, I mean, counties can do various things. There's different rules for the counties. I mean, you can be in Chester County and go to the Board of Elections and there's one set of rules, and you can go to Delaware County 20 minutes away and there's another set of rules at their Board of Elections. So there's different ways. I mean, you could have, a city give you a whole bunch of drop boxes and one county say, we're going to give you one drop box for the entire county. So they're already kind of doing that. Counties are kind of making decisions about how their elections are run. Municipalities, that would get to, I couldn't even imagine. You have to really choose about what municipality you want to live in if they're making decisions on their own.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Kadita, because that's another thing that keeps coming up in Pennsylvania's many court battles during elections is how much leeway counties have to choose different ways to run their elections on their own.
And Donna I'm looking at the chat, and Donna made a good point. I mean, you weren't allowed, but some counties were IDing voters last year at the polls, right? It's not permitted, but I mean, that's why you call and bring somebody in.
And I'm also responding to Lindsay's question, who had asked if these are definitions from the census. So this is actually, it's a group called the American Communities Project, which does this kind of granular demographic work. If I can find it. It's not interesting when I'm typing, but I would like to share this because I think it's a cool resource. Another question comes from, let's see, Alan, who asks, which voting expansion initiatives do you think could pass both current houses of the legislature, so House and Senate? Alan, that is $1 million question. I don't like to bet on these things, but either of you have any takes on what's the most likely here?
I have hope for opening up elections to all. I think that both parties kind of maybe interested in that one. So I think if there's something, there's that.
Yeah.
We're kind of close. We're kind of close to early voting with the way in which vote by mail is done. I would love to see early voting be a true thing here in Pennsylvania. I mean, if you could have I'm being sarcastic, the progressive bastions of Georgia and North Carolina have early voting, why can't Pennsylvania? Right. So I think that there's things that we can do. And I think it's just up to the voters. You voted. Now, the next step is to talk to your legislators and tell them these are the things that you want to happen so that we can have an expanded democracy here and we have more people with access to democracy.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have anything you would want to add on that?
I really don't. I mean, it is communicating with your legislators. I mean, interestingly enough, right? It's the Republicans who enacted the mail-in voting and didn't realize the implications because of COVID, right? So I think people and now now it's a good thing, honestly, but across both parties, they've finally recognized that it is a good thing. But I just think we're still learning. This is all new to us in Pennsylvania. I know Texas has had it and others, but Pennsylvania it's just new to it, and we'll get there. We have a lot of I'm hoping that the House and the Senate will maybe take some actions.
We'll see. One thing I'll also flag, just as people watching legislation move, one of the things we often see on elections, but also just like any issue when we have a legislature that's so divided, so very narrowly Democratic controlled House, Democratic governor, Republican controlled Senate, you get horse trading. And so one of the big things that's happening on elections is Democrats becoming much more vocally open to voter ID. And that's a Republican priority. So don't be surprised if there is some sort of an omnibus election bill where a bunch of these changes are made at some point, that it might include some form of voter ID as well. So in terms of like voting access advocates, I would say they would look at that as a little bit of a mixed bag, but there's also lots of different ways to do voter ID. So the details are always really, really important. We're getting to the end of our time. We've got about 6 minutes left. But I do, and feel free to add in some more questions and we can get to them if we can. But I want to ask both of you just any other big takeaways that you have, either looking back at this election that we missed or looking forward to 2024, 2025, judicial elections and beyond. What are you looking at? What do you think is important? Deb, I can start.
This is my mantra. Like it isn't just the Supreme Court, right? All of our appellate courts. So I think people finally stepped up to the plate and voted for Commonwealth Court this year, but still it was, as Khadija mentioned, it was a drop off. But our Commonwealth Court is often a stepping stone. Our Superior Court is often a stepping stone for the Supreme Court. If you look at history, many of our Supreme Court judges have come from Superior and Commonwealth courts. So we need to focus on all of our appellate courts. And I think people are finally recognizing that. I don't know what will happen in 2025, but it is important that we take that into consideration.
Yeah. And Khadija, same question to you. What are you watching? What's important to you?
I'm watching the voters and those who need to be voters. And I'm congratulating them for coming out and casting a ballot in 2023 in record numbers in many counties and making their voices heard. I'm thankful for organizations, grassroots, and others who are doing this work of providing civic education so we can get people feeling comfortable about coming out and casting a ballot 2 times a year here in the Commonwealth. I'm very happy that we've had this conversation about open primaries and closed primaries, because this is a reminder to those out there watching today or their loved ones who people need to talk to 3 of your friends and ask them to check their voter registration status, because if they are registered as unaffiliated, they will not be able to cast a ballot for a candidate in the upcoming April primary. It is still April. We're still having this primary in April, as far as I know, that they need to check their status so they can change your party if you choose to do that. And you can do that as many times throughout your life as you would like to do. And we encourage you to do that so that everybody's voice can be heard in every single election, not just the presidential years.
All right. Well, I think that will do it. We do have a couple minutes left, but I think I got to all the big questions I wanted to ask you to. And we got through a lot of great questions from our audience. So I just want to thank both of you for coming on. This was wonderful and really good information. I do have an outro that I am supposed to read, but I think I got it all.
Well, I
without
just want to
reading it.
say Spotlight has had some really good information available. And so I want to thank you. That article about the spending, the in-depth investigation and reporting, I think is terrific. So I want to say thank you for doing that.
Thank
And I
you.
want to say thank you. I thank you for that, Deb. And I want to thank y'all too, because you provided such great information about the courts this year. That interactive guide that you had online that people could click an issue to see how it relates and why they need to vote for judges. I mean, I've been saying hashtag courts matter for many, many years now, and they do matter. And so I'm just glad about all the reporting you all did to highlight that and give people a reason to come out and vote in that election.
Thank you so much. Shout out to Elizabeth Estrada, the editor who put that together. It was a lot of work. She did a phenomenal job. And yeah, I'll promote all of our election content. We have an election landing page. We will continue doing a ton of guides and just, how to vote and candidate information stuff over the next year. We're looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. So thank you again to our panelists. Thank you again to everybody who tuned in. For more of our ongoing election coverage, resources, guides, you name it, please visit spotlightpa.org/elections. That's the landing page I referred to. And I think we'll call it there. Thanks so much. Have a great night, everybody.